All right, welcome back to the RockStop. My name is Chris. Got Rick from the band Refresh joining me in studio. And on the phone line, we've been playing some music off his latest album, punk rock legend, CJ Ramone. How's it going, CJ?
Going all right. How's it going with you guys?
Oh, we're doing great. So glad you called in. And first and foremost, I do want to thank you for taking time out of your day. I really do appreciate it.
Not a problem, not a problem.
All right, so let's get right into it. You got the latest album out, American Beauty, off of Fat Records. I mean, I've been jamming to it. I love it. I think it's awesome. And you got a tour coming up. I want to get into all of that. But what was the thought process going into this record? This is your third record under the CJ Ramone name. So what was the thought process for this one?
This record was different from the other ones for a couple of reasons. In general, I usually have all my songs written, sometimes years before I actually record them. Wow. I'm constantly writing songs, so I've used the voice memo on my iPhone, and whenever I got an idea, I pick up my acoustic, I throw it down, and then later on I'll work on it. So for this record, I was confident getting close to the recording date, and about a month before we were set to get to work on it, I sat down with the songs that I had written. It was a total of about 16, maybe 20 songs, and I started going through them and listening to them, figuring I'd start demoing pretty quickly. But what I found was, when I started listening to the songs, I just didn't like them. It was first time that ever really happened to me, that I actually did not like a big group of songs like that I had written.
Wow.
And because we were just a couple of weeks out, I got into a little bit of not a panic, but I got a little bit nervous, and I started trying to rework a couple of the songs, and came to the conclusion that, these just ain't going to cut it. So with about 2 weeks before I was supposed to be heading out to California to get into the studio, I decided what I'd do is just lock myself in the basement every night after I put my kids in bed, and I went downstairs with a pot of coffee and a bottle of Jack Daniels, and I started writing songs. And it was probably, because it was just so completely different, it was probably the most fun I've had writing a record to date. But it was just totally outside the box of how I usually do it, and a bit uncomfortable at first. But once I got locked in and started going for it, the songs really started to roll. I didn't use anything that I had previously written. Couple of song titles I think I pulled off. I pulled out of that batch of songs that I ditched. But yeah, in 2 weeks, wrote an entire record, music and lyrics.
Wow.
And the whole album, between writing and recording, came together actually in less than a month. Wow. We only spent 11 days in the studio recording, so this one was different for me.
That's awesome, man. Wow, who knew? I mean, the album sounds incredible. I mean, I think it may be your best yet. I really dug the last album, Last Chance to Dance, which we had. I mean, that was a terrific album, and now this latest one, wow, I had no idea it came together so quickly. After
sometimes that the added pressure, it kind of pulls the best stuff out of you. So
that's very true.
I think, not that I'm not going to plan on doing that again, but it's good to know that if it happens again, then I'll be able to pull it off. But definitely not the most comfortable way to do a record.
Right, I understand that. And you wrote every song on the record aside from the Tom Waits cover, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and that Tom Waits cover, Pony, it is awesome. I really dig that song. It's a great version of it. You've been a fan of Tom Waits for a while, huh?
Yeah, in fact, when the Ramones did, when we were recording the last record there, I had wanted to. I suggested the Tom Waits cover, I Don't Want to Grow Up, for that record too.
Right. Yeah.
But Joey and I were both Tom Waits fans, so we knew that there's no way Johnny would would allow the song to get on the record if I suggested it. So so me and Joey got together and decided that it was best if he submitted the song for the record, and we ended up getting that onto Adios Amigos, and it turned out to be one of the better songs on the record.
Right, so. That was a music video and everything, right? Yeah. That was a great cover as well. So Rick, you got a question for CJ? Since he was mentioning Joey.
I'm a huge fan. This is this record's incredible. I was watching the King Cobra, the making of the Ray Conquista record, and I heard you talking about writing with Joey and how you would go over there and write songs, and I was just wondering kind of what his songwriting process was like and how that's affected you, as a songwriter.
Joey was, I think everybody understands at this point. Joey was really the heart of the band. Guy was, he was the heart of the band. He wrote songs about what he felt.
Yeah.
And his advice, what I learned from him anyway in songwriting was, he always said, every song, every lyric has to have a punch to it. You can't waste any words. There should be no throwaway lines. There should be no, filler lines or anything. You have to write every line so that it has impact.
That is such great advice.
No kidding. And it sounds like common sense, and it doesn't sound like anything, really deep or whatnot. But just that little bit of direction really changed the way that I approached writing lyrics. So, getting to work with him really was a privilege, of course. But his process was kind of like what I just described to you. He was, he would lock himself in his apartment and he would sit down and he would work. He would really work at crafting the best songs that he could. He had a guitar that was tuned to an open chord, so that he'd be able to, he didn't want to go through the hassle of learning how to actually play, a standard tuning.
Yeah.
Because, he wasn't a guitar player. He was a songwriter. So the most important thing to him was being able to get his ideas down, not, learn how to play guitar. So he had a guitar tuned to an open chord, and he just sat down and busted the ideas out. I mean, when I listen to his, from hanging out in his apartment with him and just listening to all his favorite stuff, when I hear his songs, I can hear the influences in some of the stuff that he writes, and that was a really neat thing to kind of sit back and somebody who's a legend and somebody who I admired and whatnot, to understand where his influences were coming from and how they kind of how they kind of fit into his songs. That was a pretty neat thing to watch. But yeah, that was pretty much his writing process. It would just be lock himself in his apartment, with his guitar and just write. He wrote about stuff that he knew. He wrote about stuff that happened to him. Cabbies on crack and hiding his head case and all that stuff. All stories from his everyday life.
Right on.
That was what he was about.
Those a couple songs off Mondo Bizarro, which was your first record with the band in 1992. Which is one of my favorite Ramones records. I mean, a lot of people talk about, the stuff they did in the 70s, which, of course, is legendary. But I go back to listening to Mondo Bizarro all the time. I really love that record.
Yeah. It's, one thing I realized over the years is the stuff that you hear when you're, I guess, in your most formative years of music listening is the stuff that you always go back to. I'm lucky enough that I grew up listening to everything from country to metal.
Right.
So I've always been a music fan as opposed to a metal fan or a punk fan or a country fan or pop fan. I've always been a music fan in general.
Right.
And But I find now, people so what new bands are you into? And I am always looking for new stuff. I'm always checking out new bands, always constantly. I'm on the road. I play with, probably 200 other bands in a year.
Wow.
So I'm always hearing new stuff and checking out new stuff. But at the end of the day, when I go home and I sit down, I still throw on Sabbath, or I still throw on Johnny Cash or the Ramones. Or, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I listen to this stuff that really hit me when I was a kid, when I was just coming into my own. So I think that's what everybody does. So when you say, the Mondo Bizarro is your favorite album, that's not surprising to me. You're probably listening to it at a time in your life when it was, the most important thing in your life was music.
Very true. Very true. So let's talk about, some of my listeners may not know the whole story. You got in the Ramones right after Dee Dee left the band in 1989. And, I mean, as Tommy Ramone said at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, he said, you kept the band young. And I can't agree more. I mean, you did breathe new life into that band.
Yeah, it's, to me anyway, I've always kind of, when people ask me what my contribution was, it's always kind of a weird thing, because it's not really up to me. It was never up to me to make that decision or say what it was. It was really, what the band said it was, you know what I mean? And the fans said it was. So, Tommy had mentioned that, and Johnny said in interviews that I gave the band a kick in the ass, and Joey talked about how much fun it was to have me in the band, and Monty Melnick, the tour manager, said that I was the easiest one to deal with in the band. So, it's all out there, what I mean? And I am really proud as hell to have been able to contribute anything to, in my opinion, one of the greatest rock bands of all time,
Yeah, absolutely. But
it really is up to the band and up to the fans to say what my contribution is, not necessarily me. As
a fan, I got to say, I don't think there's a lot of guys that could have really stepped into the role that you stepped into. And, there was some definite inner turmoil in that band. And as you said in the documentary, End of the Century, you kind of just had to observe. You couldn't, there might have been some guys, if they, got another bass player that got in there and tried to do too much or not do enough. I think you walked that fine line perfectly, and that's what gave that band an additional 6-7 years. I'm not sure they would have had if it wasn't for you.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. But, there's some stuff that went on that I know that I was a part of, like, picking songs. We've all voted on songs to get on the records, but I just felt like one of the ways that I helped out kind of like in a mechanical way was, when we recorded records, we would all vote on the songs, and then I would get all the demo tapes of the songs that we were doing. I would have to learn the songs, and then go to rehearsal and teach them to Johnny, and then, we would run the songs down. But because Joey did not come to rehearsals, I would also have to learn all the lyrics and the vocal lines.
Wow.
And I would actually sing the songs at the rehearsals and the prep for going into the studio.
Wow.
Once we were in the studio, Johnny hated the recording studio, and Mark was a crazy, unbelievable perfectionist. I mean, like, I don't think I ever played with anybody who was so particular about what went on tape. And, if you think about it, that's really smart, because once it goes down on there, you can't take it back.
Yeah.
But, there were times when I would go through 30 takes of a song with Mark, and, so he could get his drum line down, and it would just be me playing bass and singing, and Mark playing drums.
Right.
So there wasn't, Johnny would maybe lay down a guide track or something, but that's when I feel like I really worked, was in that process, was in the rehearsal and recording process, and I just did as much as I possibly could to kind of make the whole thing a little bit easier, because I knew at that point, not that they didn't love playing and all that stuff, but I knew at that point they didn't enjoy the studio all that much. Joey did.
Yeah.
Joey enjoyed the studio, but Johnny, not so much.
Yeah, as I was talking about earlier, the sometimes the inner turmoil of this band, and I don't know if people really know all of what went on. I mean, you were there, you saw it firsthand. I mean, of course, if you watch the documentaries, it's all about, maybe Linda Ramone and all that stuff, but there was way more going on, right, than just that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was, but there was a lot of inner turmoil in the band, without a doubt. But you have to think of it this way. You live with we all live together on the road almost 24/7 when we're touring.
Yeah.
I mean, every decision that you make, even a lot of the stuff in your personal life, because of the scheduling of the band, is affected by the band. There's always, when you spend that much time with people and your whole life is so intertwined with theirs, there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be hassles.
Right.
It's and if you think about it, 22 years of it, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And for me, it was just like like living in a house where mom and dad doesn't get along.
Right.
That's
right.
what it was like. You know what I mean? It's always a little bit uneasy and whatnot, but it wasn't like an overwhelming black cloud over everything that happened.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We used to ride in the van. For the most part, I just used to keep my headphones on and sit in the back of the van and read books. That was what I did on tour. Plus, I was usually pretty hungover. But so to me, it wasn't that bad. The only time you really recognized it in sort is when Johnny and Joey were forced to communicate, like when we were voting on songs for a new record, or when there was some kind of big decision that needed to be made. But otherwise, they just kind of, ignored each other.
Right,
Which, like I said, it's like living in a house where mom and dad don't get along. And that's just how it is. You know what I mean? In any long-term relationship where you're forced to be together, that's what it gets to at some point.
Right, and they were able to keep it together for the good of the band, good of the fans.
Yep.
And
well, they understood how important the Ramones were, to music, but also to their fans, and that's why they stuck around. They knew that, that there was a good reason for them to stay together. Besides, and that's not to say they didn't do it because there was money to be made. Of course, you know what I mean?
Of course, yeah.
You got to work, you got to make money, but it wasn't just money. You know what I mean? That wasn't the only thing that they were out there for. They were out there because they loved it and they loved the fans.
Right. And I get a little annoyed sometimes by hearing a lot of the negative stuff. I mean, I don't know. Did you see, I'm sure you saw End of the Century, the documentary. It did kind of focus, on some more negative things, but you're right. It was only a small part of, the history of this great band.
Yep. There's been a lot of, Johnny has taken the brunt of the negative comments and stuff. It's it's really obvious, you know what I mean, that people found him difficult. But this is the thing that you have to take into consideration when you judge Johnny. And this doesn't absolve him of all the negative things that people have said about him. I mean, obviously some of it's true. But here's what you have to consider. After Tommy Ramone is the guy. Tommy Ramone is the guy. He came up with the sound, the look, told those guys what instrument they were going to play. He invented the punk rock drumming style. Tommy is the guy who created the Ramone. He's the architect. He is the guy.
Yep.
Anybody that says anything different is full of crap.
Right.
He really is the guy. So when Tommy finally decides that he cannot tour anymore, Tommy didn't like the road, and that's why he left the band.
Right.
But stayed on as the manager, co-producer guy.
Right.
But at some point, got kind of pushed out of even that position. And if you deconstruct the Ramones' career and go backwards, you look at when their albums stop being great side for side. It's End of the Century. The reason why is because Tommy is now completely out of the picture. He's no longer operating as the manager or co-producer.
That's right.
And if you look at it, the next great album they put out, which I really felt was a comeback album, was Too Tough to Die.
Uh-huh.
That's because Tommy's back in the picture.
That's right. He produced that album.
After Too Tough to Die goes away, everything kind of gets kind of whacked out again, and they go back to working with producers who don't understand them, and they kind of flip-flopping between like a metal sound and a punk sound. The next album to me, that's a second comeback, is Mondo Bizarro. Mm-hmm. That's because Ed Stasium comes back.
Yes.
So anyway, so once Tommy is out of the picture, sorry, I know that was a bit of a tangent, but once Tommy is out of the picture, Johnny now becomes the undisputed leader of the band. There's a short time period where it goes back where there's some kind of internal struggle.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is Johnny becomes the leader of the band. Now you have to understand Johnny's position at this point. He's now in charge of Joey, who is mentally unstable. You know, it's well documented.
Right,
Joey had OCD. He had a lot of problems.
Right.
Mark, who is a raging alcoholic.
Yes.
And Dee Dee, who's drug addict with his own mental issues.
Right. To keep that all together,
you have to understand, like Johnny right now, it's like he's the bus driver on the special needs bus.
Right. I mean, I totally see where you're coming from. That's the position that
he's in at that point. So can you imagine? It's like corralling cats. Can you imagine trying to get those three guys together just to show up on time, just to be able to get into the studio? End of the century, Mark was so drunk that he didn't even play on the record. It's studio musicians.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, that's
Johnny left the recording session. Johnny left because Phil Spector was driving him out of his mind.
Yeah,
the only one who actually plays on that record is Joey. And he's singing.
Wow.
Yeah, Dee Dee wasn't playing bass.
I remember reading that in his book Lobotomy. I remember Dee Dee wrote that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. So like this is what Johnny's dealing with.
Yeah.
So you want to know why Johnny's such a hard ass? Why he's so strict and does things the way he does? That's what he's dealing with. He's dealing with a group of guys who are basically, all suffering from arrested development.
Right. Yeah. That is great insight. I mean, Johnny does get a lot of flack, but you're absolutely right. It's
and
a lot
that's not to
with.
say that Johnny was not, was not mean by nature. Johnny could be a mean son of a gun, but he was fair in his dealings for the most part.
Yeah.
But he just didn't have a lot of patience for BS. He just didn't have patience for it, and he did not, he didn't mix words. If he didn't like you, you knew it.
Absolutely.
So that's why there's two things I've tried to kind of get across to the public because they've been made. One of them was totally ignored, and that was Tommy's role in the band.
Yeah.
And the other one is the thing that Johnny was just a bad dude and nobody liked him and he was tough to deal with and everything else. He was. In a lot of ways he was.
But he had to be.
You got to understand the position that the guy was in, and he was not in an easy position. In fact, something I found out just a few years ago that really blew me away. Johnny and Dee Dee were the two guys that were the closest in the band. They were, from when they were kids, they were like hoodlums. You know what I mean? They really were. They used to throw TV sets at people from the top of their apartment building and break into drugstores, and they were like hoodlums.
Right.
But Dee Dee got to be such a burden and so difficult to deal with that when he quit, Johnny was relieved. Everyone else was telling him, you got to break up the band, but Johnny just felt relieved.
Right. I watched the Ramones Raw had a commentary track, the DVD, where I listened to Johnny talk about that when they're like, oh, was he just waiting for Dee Dee to come back in the band? No, he had pretty much washed his hands of Dee Dee and was happy, at least this is kind of what he said in the commentary, that Dee Dee was still writing songs for the band, but he didn't have to put up with his crap anymore.
Yep. And that's the point of this whole thing. What I didn't realize was, I just found this out a couple years back, was that Dee Dee actually approached Johnny in like 1991 or 1992 and said, I want to come back to the band.
Wow.
And Johnny told him no.
Wow. I had no... Wow.
And I always expected that day to come. Like in my mind, I thought Dee Dee's going to get cleaned up. He's going to, he's going to do his thing for a little while, and then he's going to come back and get into the band. And my plan was, when Johnny came to me and said, hey, Dee Dee wants to come back, I was going to tell Johnny, okay, no problem. I'm stepping aside without a fight. But just let me be his tech.
Oh,
so
wow.
I figured, that was going to be my fallback position. Was if I'm not going to be, if I'm not going to be in the Ramones, I want to be Dee Dee's tech.
Wow.
Because I never had a tech, and neither did Dee Dee.
Oh, really?
There was a guitar tech and a drum tech, but me and Dee Dee, neither one of us had a tech.
Huh.
Rick Weinman, who was Johnny's tech and went on to become Eddie Vedder's tech for a good number of years, and Mitch Keller, who was Marky's tech, used to kind of take turns going back and forth on helping me out or helping Dee Dee out. But neither one of us ever had a tech. So I figured if Dee Dee came back to the band, I would be his tech. And, I was going to tell Johnny, if you make me his tech, I could keep an eye on him, let you know if he was getting into trouble or doing drugs. And
yeah, you had it planned out.
Yep. But the day never came, and I was pretty... In fact, related to it, when we got offered to do Lollapalooza, I had told Johnny in 1992, after I got into a motorcycle wreck, that the summer of 96, I was taking off to do a motorcycle tour, and I told Johnny, I'm giving you 4 years notice. I'm going cross country on my bike, and I'm not going to be here. And Johnny said, don't worry, we'll be retired by then.
Wow.
So when we were doing our retirement tour in the end of 95, the little clubs, and we got the offer for Lollapalooza, Johnny came to me, or it might have been January or February of 96. Johnny came to me and he said, we got offered Lollapalooza this summer. And I said, Johnny, I gave you 4 years notice. I can't do any better than that. And he was like, well, we're going to do Lollapalooza. And I said, I'm not doing it, John.
Wow.
I said, I'm not doing it. I said, we tried to get on that tour for years now, and they turned us down every time. And now, because we're retiring and we have something to offer them, they want us.
Yeah.
I was like, you don't need them. We don't need to do it, John. I was like, let's just bow out. We already told the fans we're retiring. This is it. So he was like, take your time and think about it, and let me know what you think. So I went back to him and I said, why don't you do yourself a favor? It would be the most poetic ending to the most awkward career in the history of music. Get Dee Dee and Tommy back in the band, rehearse for a couple of months, and go out as the original lineup. I said, I'll be going cross country. I'll stop in a couple of cities if you want and jump up and do a song or something. I was like, but, that's really, the fans would love that. The press would love that. It would just be unbelievably poetic. And he was like, CJ, you're an old fan. You want to see Dee Dee and Tommy because you're an old fan. He was like, the new fans want to see you and Mark. He said, a good portion of the audience never saw Dee Dee or Tommy in the band.
Yeah.
They want to see you.
Right.
So I said, all right, well, here's the deal. I'll do the tour, but I'm doing it on my bike. I don't want to hear about interviews or sound check or, dinners or anything like that. I'm going to be on my own schedule. And he was like, okay, but if you miss a show, you lose a week's pay. A week's pay was $700. I was like, oh, jeez. I was like, oh, boy, that's going to break the bank. So that's what ended up happening. I did the tour on my bike.
Wow.
And that was it. That was our retirement.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the footage of you guys from '96, and I mean, you talk about playing club shows that final year or so, but you also played like in South America, of course, soccer stadiums of 40,000 people or whatever it was. And I mean, like, what was that like? I mean, I've heard you before talk about how you rather club shows.
Yeah. I'm just, that's just where I'm from. That's really where I'm comfortable. That's what I like.
Yeah.
I like when the people are up close and they can see your face and your facial expressions, and you can smell what they had for dinner. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of thing that I like. I just dig that. That's a show to me.
Right.
The big stadiums and all that, it's kind of cool. It's impressive, but sometimes you're 25 yards from the crowd.
Yeah.
You can't even make out, you can't even make out who's who from where you're standing. And even though there's a lot of energy there and the screaming crowd and everything, it's just not my deal. It's just not my thing.
Yeah, as a fan,
I understand why it's important. That's how you gauge how much money you're making. That's how you gauge your popularity if you're doing. But I mean, if I played in clubs for 300 to 500 kids for the rest of my life, and died on the side of the road somewhere in a tour van, I would have nothing to complain about, brother. If I never played in front of another big festival crowd or something like that, it wouldn't mean anything to me. I like playing in clubs. I like playing the smaller shows.
Right,
it's just my thing.
And as a fan, those are the shows I prefer to see. In fact, when you swing by Chicago at the Cobra Lounge May 11th, you better believe I'll be there. Rick, I'm sure you'll be there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're definitely looking forward to the tour, which kicks off about a week and a half, right?
Yeah, 15th. We're in Altoona, Pennsylvania to kick it off. Railroad City. That's it's going to be a big one too. We're doing like the outer loop of the states, which means we're going down the East Coast, cross through the South, and then Southwest, then up the West Coast, and then we go back and forth across the border back to the East Coast. So it's probably the biggest loop you can possibly do on a tour.
Yeah.
I think it's a total of like 12,000 miles or 12,500 or something like that. We just went out and we had to pick up a new tour vehicle because the old one got wiped out last summer, so we got a van to do it in.
Yeah. Now, who you going out with? You got some other Fat Records bands you going out with?
The guys in the band, the guys coming out with me, it's Chris and Josh from the Huntingtons. And then then we got Nate Sander, who's been with me for a while, young guy from New York, really good player. We have the band Big Eyes on tour with us in the States, and on the new record, on the song Without You.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite tunes on that record.
Right. The gal singing the other part in that song, doing the duet with me, is Kate Eldridge. She's the singer from Big Eyes.
Yeah, that's a great song.
They're actually from right out here by me in New York, so we figured it'd be a good pairing for the two of us to get out there. She's got a real heavy New York accent, too. So.
Yeah, that's a great duet on that record. Now, I wanted to ask you about, speaking of the new record, you got the song Tommy's Gone, which, I mean, it just sounds like you and an acoustic guitar, very stripped down and just a real heavy song, like heavy emotional.
Yeah, it was, I wrote Three Angels for Johnny, Joey, and Dee Dee. And that one was a tough one to write because it's hard to explain your relationship with somebody that you idolized as a kid and then was in a band with and became friends. I mean, that was just like that was a tough one. Even though the song came to me really easily and the lyrics came out all at once and the song got written in a few minutes, I had attempted to write a song like that for a couple of years and just never came up with anything. But this one with Tommy came up kind of out of the blue. It was I had it in mind that I wanted to write something for him after he died, and actually fans, a lot of fans have requested it. Said, what are you going to do something for Tommy? So when we were out, I was out in California to record the record, and that's Steve Soto and Dan Root from the Adolescents, and Pete Sosa from the Street Dogs on drums. We were recording out in Orange, California at Buzz Bomb Studios, and I was staying with a friend out there who had a big guitar collection. I was staying in the room where they all were, and in his room he had a dobro sitting on a guitar stand, and I picked it up and just started playing around, and I guess I got this little idea, and the night before we were due to have our last day in the studio, I came up with the lyrics.
Oh wow!
And so the next day when we got to the studio and everything was all done, I said to Paul Miner, who's the who co-produced and engineered, I said, "Hey Paul, do me a favor, just leave a mic set up, and let me just run this idea down." I picked out the guitar part and laid the vocal track down, and we listened back to it, and I was unsure. We added the little drum and the tambourine part in there, and even after I loved it right away. I immediately liked it. It was haunting, and it said exactly what I wanted to say, but I wasn't sure if it really fit on the record. And so I played it for a couple of people whose opinions I trusted, and everybody was of the same opinion. They were just like, "You gotta put it on.
Yeah.
You gotta put it on."
I'm definitely.
And I realized, I probably was just. It's the first time I ever put a song like that on a record, and I guess I just had a little bit of cold feet there, and
I could understand
needed
that.
a little.
Yeah, but it came out great, and I'm really glad it was included in this record because, I mean, it makes it more diverse. That it's you're great punk rock throughout, and then a song like that, I think it's excellent.
The thing about it was the idea for the song is that I really wondered how Tommy saw how everything unfolded, how he felt about it. You know what I mean? And that's why I was like, were you mad about it? Were you upset about it, or did you kind of step back and watch it happen and feel like a proud father? Because he is the creator of the Ramones. Like I said, he's the architect, and I just always kind of wondered about it. And of course, now, if publicly, I guess he was very cool with it, but I still had that little question, like, come on, you had to be a little bit upset about it to have been squeezed out of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then have to sit back and watch them. And even though the Ramones didn't achieve the huge commercial success that Tommy had intended them to make, they had a 22-year career and have gone down in history as one of the greatest, American bands of all time.
Yep.
And that's why, to me, it's important for Tommy to, for people to know that Tommy is the architect.
Yeah.
He was the guy with the vision. He's the guy who put that together.
And I'm glad you're speaking out about it because I'm not sure a lot of people do understand that or realize that. So, I'm definitely glad you're speaking out about that. And
I can tell you, Johnny told me this. Johnny's the guy who verified it for me because I had, like I said before, I had kind of deconstructed the Ramones' career by record. Just worked backwards from the last record to the first one, and looked, and tried to figure out like what happened. How did they go so far? How did they just get so far, off base from where they were?
Right.
And that's what I realized. It was as soon as Tommy is not there,
that makes
it's a whole different ball game.
Wow, absolutely true. So let's talk about some of your time with the Ramones as far as like TV appearances, things like that, things that maybe a lot of people don't talk about as much. Like you guys made, like in the 90s, I remember the Space Ghost Coast to Coast TV appearance. I remember USA Up All Night with Gilbert Gottfried. Yeah. What was that kind of stuff like?
It was fun. That kind of stuff was fun. that was...
Was that like difficult at all between Joey and Johnny trying to like do a TV show?
That wasn't even an issue. It was kind of funny because they didn't fight for... to be recognized one over the other, but they both were kind of reserved and threw their shots in. Johnny, always wanted to, be the spokesman and represent, but Joey would always like slide something. So it was fun to watch. It really was. They were like, it was just, I don't know. It was really not as bad as everybody thinks it was.
Right.
It really was not that bad.
Cool.
It really wasn't.
Yeah, that's Yeah. I just remember thinking about some of the TV appearances. I mean, you guys did a bunch. I remember Jay Leno. You guys did his show when you right after Mondo Bizarro, I think. And Steven Seagal was on the show. I recall that footage. Did you get a chance to meet him at all? Or?
Well, we were hanging out backstage, and he was dating that really gorgeous gal from England, the one who was in Weird Science. God, I can't think of the gal's name. Really pretty girl, though. While he was on set, we were backstage, and she came over and was talking with us. And he came back and was like, you know, just dismissive and rude, and just walked away. You know, grabbed her hand and just walked away. We were like, "Come to the show. We'll put you on the guest list." But
yeah, you know, it seemed that way. Was it Kelly Brock?
Yeah.
Was that her? Kelly Brock?
Yeah, Kelly. Yeah,
something I can't remember. But yeah,
it's Kelly something.
Kelly something. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
anyway, it was a lot of fun, and she was gorgeous in person too.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, I just saw. I seen that clip of the Ramones playing on Leno, and yeah, it seemed like Seagal seemed pretty dismissive of Joey when just an observation, but
yep.
And then
he's a weird cat, man, but he's been around a long time. That guy, he's had staying power.
He has.
Not everything he's done has been stellar, but I mean, the guy's made a good career for himself over the years. So.
Yeah, he certainly has. I'm more of a Van Damme fan myself, but but yeah. As far as some other things I wanted to talk about real quick, so you played with Robby Krieger. I mean, I don't know. He did a live show with you guys in Hollywood around '92.
Yeah, he jumped up and did that with us.
So were you a huge Doors fan, or?
I'm not a huge fan, but I'm definitely a fan. They've got some really good ones, you know. Some of some of their heavier stuff, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The you know, I think the thing that you can't kind of get your head around or appreciate about the Doors is the power of Jim Morrison's personality.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, listening to the records is one thing, you know what I mean? Like, I always kind of held a grudge because they didn't have a bass player. But but you know, I think if you know, the Doors music probably was just really their live shows were probably really incredible, and I think that's what built their career and their reputation more than the songs themselves. And that's not to take anything away from their songs. I mean, songs like The End or Roadhouse Blues and stuff like that. I mean, you know, some of those songs are just unbelievable classics.
Yeah.
But I would venture to say that you know, it was probably on the strength of Morrison's live show that they really built their reputation.
I agree with you. Now, let me ask you this real quick about the Ramones. Of course, everybody knows the classic horror movie Freaks, 1932. This was a huge influence to the Ramones, and you know, you had Pinhead guys wearing Pinhead masks come out on stage with you quite often.
Yep.
How much talking of that movie was going on? I mean, did they quote lines and stuff, or?
Well, the movie was very celebrated, and you know, we were all fans of it. And of course, being a Ramones fan, you had to be a fan of the movie. But
yeah,
you know, it was really more the exploitation genre in general, and exploitation films and horror films that Johnny was a huge fan of.
Right.
You know, Joey was more a music guy. Joey was definitely more a music guy.
Oh yeah.
But Johnny was really the horror film, you know, exploitation film guy, and that's where a lot, him and Dee Dee both.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of that stuff came from. But you know, eventually, of course, Dee Dee was way more about music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just it's sort of like, if you haven't seen that movie 1932's Freaks, I mean, it kind of gives you some, like, if you never knew what the Pinhead meant and the Gabba Gabba Hey and all that kind of stuff, that was kind of taken from that movie, I guess. So, yeah.
Yep. It was you know, that line, you know, in the movie they said "Gooble gobble, we accept you," but the Ramones changed it to "Gabba Gabba," and it was that kind of became like the little catchphrase there that made people sit up and take notice, and it became like the besides "Hey Ho, Let's Go." I mean, "Gobble Gobble, We Accept You" was really a very anthemic thing for Ramones fans. Originally the Ramones fans were, outcasts, just people who did not fit, and that's where they found a place to fit was at the Ramone shows.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now we talked a little bit about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony, and I've heard you speak about it before. How it doesn't mean much to you, but you're glad the band got in. I mean, personally, as a fan, I thought you should have been there. Even look at like when Nirvana got inducted, Dave Grohl technically wasn't, it's got to be like 25 years after the first record comes out. Grohl wasn't in the band for that first record. So, there's no reason I didn't think that you shouldn't be there. I thought it was nice that Tommy mentioned you, but.
Yeah. That just shows you how little I cared. I mean, I really didn't even argue. I never said anything. Johnny was like, "We're getting into the Hall of Fame, but they're not inducting you." I was like, "Yeah, okay." I was like, "Big deal. The Ramones are getting in."
Right.
I knew it was important to them. Yeah. But the thing is that, there's no continuity to how the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame does it. They had Metallica when they got inducted. Their new bass player had only been in the band a year.
Wow.
And he got inducted in.
Yeah. There's no rhyme or reason. Right.
The Ramones were inducted, and instead of just doing the original band, they had Marky in too.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, and other bands that they've inducted, they've only inducted the original band or one version of the band when they were at their peak. So there's no continuity to how they do it. And, to me, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is not a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They should call it the Music Hall of Fame, and then I could respect it.
Absolutely.
But, they put stuff in there that's not rock and roll.
Madonna.
It's not rock and roll is a specific musical type.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So call it the Music Hall of Fame or something like that. You know what I mean?
I agree.
And then at least it makes it kind of legitimate. But they call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they put in a bunch of stuff that isn't rock and roll.
Yeah.
Disco bands and
rap.
I just don't get. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. And I've been saying that for a long time too. It's like how is Madonna or Tupac? I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not that they're not great artists in their genre.
It's just not rock and roll.
Right. It's just not rock and roll, and that's that to me that's a thing that totally delegitimizes the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, real quick, since we don't want to hold you too long, so we'll try to move along here. But I got a few more questions. The only time I think did you play with Dee Dee was that final show, like that he was actually on stage with you.
No, I played with the Remains for a little while. Did a couple of shows with the Remains, so I actually got to play with Dee Dee, and
that's
that was
cool.
That was really big for me. In fact, at this point, I might be one of the only people to have played with all of the Ramones.
That's true, yeah.
Because I played with Tommy, Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee. I just played with Richie down in South America.
Oh, wow.
I played with Clem Burke.
Yeah, that's right.
And at that point,
Elvis?
I mean, I think I'm the only person who's maybe Daniel Ray too.
Yeah, Daniel Ray's been around. Wow, that's pretty interesting stuff.
That is.
Yep.
A true legend we have on the line right now, Rick.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to this upcoming tour. And I imagine these days traveling on the road is a lot different than your days in the Ramones.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, definitely. Because now I drive the van and do the tour managing and do everything. I do it all. We travel with a totally stripped down, as light as we possibly can crew. But I love it, and what else I could do? I mean, I'm working on a book.
Oh, really?
I guess, I've been working on a book for
like an autobiography.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
And but I'm hopefully I'll just be able to do this until I can't do anything anymore, and then I can just retire and raise my chickens and
Right on.
pet my dog on the porch and smoke a pipe or something. But but for right now, I still feel like I got a couple years left in me, and that's what I'm gonna.
Oh yeah, I'd have to agree.
Continue
with that.
doing.
Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. Hey, yeah, like we said, May 11th, you're swinging by Chicago at the Cobra Lounge, and we'll definitely be there.
Yeah.
Can't wait for that. And
Cool.
let's see, anything else I wanted to cover real quick while I got you on the line? So, you talked about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the, it doesn't mean much. You also were given sort of a bizarre Lifetime Achievement Award, the band was, by MTV in 2001. I mean, of course, they deserved it, but I call it bizarre because you guys, it's fine unless it was edited. Did you guys even speak at that ceremony? This is when Bono...
I didn't.
Oh.
I didn't. But this is how much MTV sucks. The only reason why we got that award is because they wanted U2 to do that show, and they told MTV the only way we'll do it is if you give the Ramones a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Wow. Yeah, I thought
that's how much MTV sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was weird at the time. I'm like, well, what exactly is this? But wow, so there it is. Okay. Of course, you want to talk all about that final show at the Palace. You had a lot of guys come out. Lemmy, Eddie Vedder, Chris Cornell. A lot of
some of the guys in Rancid.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So how was that?
Yeah, that was fun, but I just thought it was a cheap ploy to sell videos.
Yeah, the word.
I just thought it was weird. It was weird and uncomfortable. The way the whole thing was run was really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They just, push the guys out on stage. Lemmy comes out, his bass ain't plugged in, nothing. But, that was still one of my greatest moments on stage, to get to play with Lemmy. That was just incredible. Probably, one of my greatest moments on stage. But yeah, I didn't think the fans dug it all that much.
Yeah, it didn't really have the Ramones feel that we were so used to. Yeah.
Yep.
I see where you're coming from.
And that's the thing that was kind of lost on the band is they didn't understand they didn't need all that stuff.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think it was just, hey, how can we sell a bunch of videos? Well, let's get all the guys from the top bands that we just toured with, to come out on stage so we can sell video. But that, Soundgarden fans ain't going to buy a Ramones video to see, Ben get up on stage and play one song and Chris get up and introduce one song. Mm-hmm. Rancid fans aren't going to buy it because Tim and Lars came up with one song.
Right.
So
yeah,
it was stupid. It was
yeah. But
it was just a cheap ploy, but it was fun. I loved playing with all those guys.
Oh,
you know what I mean? It was
absolutely.
For me, it was a whole different thing because, I was a Soundgarden fan before I got into the Ramones. I was a Motorhead fan before I got into the Ramones. I loved Rancid. You know what I mean? So it was much different. But it was, I think, for those guys from those bands, they were kind of excited to be part of it because they were. They had to pay homage to the Ramones.
Absolutely.
And that's what made it cool.
Yeah.
That's what made it good, was they really wanted to be there doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
I was wondering, I know Johnny was close with John Frusciante and some of the guys from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I was wondering if you ever got to hang out with them or what your thoughts on the Chili Peppers and stuff were.
I met, me and Joey actually played in a celebrity pool tournament against Flea and John. And so I met them. I had met them back a while ago. And those guys are cool. Anthony Kiedis, I never really I talked to him like once or twice, but just like, hey, what's up? But I like the Chili Peppers real early stuff.
Yeah.
I liked Freaky Styley and that type of stuff. I like that. I loved all that stuff. Now they just became fucking crazy good songwriters and stuff. But sorry.
No problem.
But they were huge at that point, and that's why they got that's why they did the Johnny Ramone do that big thing for prostate cancer, and that Rob Zombie had I think it was Joe Sib had organized, and Chili Peppers were on that. But yeah, Johnny got to be pretty good buddies with those guys.
Yeah.
Johnny moved out to California and became the California kid.
Yeah.
He's like, he was just like he just had all fame, all the bands, everybody used to, stop by, call him or whatever. He really
he had a
really
lot of
loved it.
Celebrity friends. Yeah.
Yep. He really enjoyed it.
So
and that's one thing you don't have in New York, you know. California really became kind of the everything for music, you know, especially for rock and roll and punk and you know, and whatnot. In New York City, New York is so trendy, like punk and rock and roll and everything. Is the only surviving scene in New York is a hardcore scene.
Yeah.
But everything, the punk rock scene is, you know, there hasn't been anything going on in years. There's been a couple good bands here and there, but as far as a scene goes, not much.
Yeah.
So California, you know, became the place, and that's why when people were all upset about, you know, about the final show, why wasn't the final show in New York? You know, blah blah blah. We wanted to do 7 nights straight at CBGB's, but New York being what it is, Hilly wanted to take too much of the money from the door.
I could imagine.
So Johnny was like, all right, whatever, we'll do it in California.
Yeah.
California, punk rock is still king. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
California, punk rock's, there's still a good punk rock scene there.
Yeah.
So it only made sense.
Right on.
Yeah.
And they are, you know, out there, they are fiercely loyal to the scene, you know?
Yeah.
Now, did you shoot a lot of, like, I don't know how many music videos you did with the Ramones, a handful or whatever, but most of those shot in California?
No.
Oh, really?
No, they were all shot out here.
Oh, wow. How was that? I was doing music videos with the band.
Painful. Painful. Doing music videos was not comfortable. It was just a whole lot of standing around, waiting for shots to get set up, and you know, just a whole lot of stuff like that. It wasn't fun. There was no fun to be had doing that. Put it that way.
Yeah.
It was just not fun.
Very un-Ramones.
Yes, yeah. We were just, you know, we were a live band.
Right.
We were a live band. That's what we were, and it was painful doing anything else.
Yep.
Yeah.
And especially because those guys were, you know, Joey was incredibly awkward. Johnny was incredibly impatient when we were doing that type of stuff. So
yeah. Well, all right. Well, we'll definitely thank you for this interview. I mean, this has been great. Huge fan of yours and the Ramones for years and years, lifelong fan. So this is definitely the biggest interview I've ever had here on this
cool.
radio
All
show.
right.
Yeah, and I wish you good luck with the record, American Beauty, and the upcoming tour. I know it's going to be great.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate that.
So, one more quick question, since it just crossed my mind real quick, about, so I was talking about music videos. You guys had a real brief cameo in the Car 54 remake.
Yeah.
Was that really, I mean, they showed the outside of CBGB's, and then, was that shot at CBGB's?
No, it was shot in Toronto, Canada.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Yeah, David Johansen was
David Johansen, yep.
Right. So,
yep, that was actually kind of fun.
Yeah.
That was actually kind of fun because I got to meet David Johansen that day and shoot the breeze with him a little bit, and that was pretty fun.
Oh, that was your first time meeting him, huh?
Yeah.
Cool.
He was a cool guy too. He really cool.
Yeah. And also, real quick, you had so your first album with the band was Mondo Bizarro, 1992, right at the height of grunge. What exactly was the feeling in the band about the grunge scene?
Well, me and Joey both dug it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to, you know, being in the Ramones and traveling so much, I used to hear stuff, you know, pretty early on because we would hit so many of those places, and I'd get turned on to it by the locals.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But Johnny, in his inimitable style, was never impressed with anything.
Right.
Never impressed with anything. But me and Joey liked it.
Cool.
I thought it was great. In fact, you know, we played a festival in Europe or Scandinavia or something, and Nirvana was headlining, and we pulled up to the festival and got out of our van and went into the cafeteria, and there were a bunch of tables set up, and it was a bunch of like smaller tables and then one big table, and we walked in and our name was on the placard in the middle of the table. And we were like, what? And and somebody from the promoter's office who was escorting us said Kurt Cobain had come in and taken our name off of one of the smaller tables and put it on the big one and put their name on the smaller one.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty neat.
Yeah,
definitely.
You know, but it's funny, you know, everyone loved and respected the Ramones.
Yeah, right.
Nobody ever did nothing for them. Nobody ever offered us a warm-up spot on a big stadium tour or nothing like that. You know, we just never got those opportunities.
But
it just never happened.
Yeah, that's too bad. But you guys were loved and respected by all these bands that essentially made it very big. So.
Yep, yeah. and I really, you know, I think 22-year career, you can't argue with that.
Right.
You know what I mean? 22 years, there's just, you know, that says success right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. So I guess we'll wrap it up, CJ. Thanks again for doing this, and good luck on the new record. I definitely encourage all my listeners to go pick it up. It's keeping punk rock alive. And as far as seeing anything close to the Ramones, CJ Ramone, you're going to want to see him live in concert.
Yeah.
Because that's the closest thing you're going to get to that punk rock energy that the Ramones had. So.
All right. Appreciate that, man.
All right. So take care. Good luck with the tour. Good luck with the record. And thanks again for doing this.
I'll see you at the Cobra Lounge.
All right, man. Cool. See you there.
Take care, fellas.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.